Sandman to the Rescue by Gloria Dominic, illustrated by Robert Casilla. Page 3. Matt Connors sat on the beach, staring at the endless parade of waves breaking upon the shore. It was a beautiful summer day at the Florida beach near Matt's home. The air was pleasantly warm, and the water sparkled in the bright sunlight. On the blanket beside Matt lay a science fiction paperback. He was halfway through it, but he had lost interest as soon as he heard the laughter. Matt could see his friends in the distance, splashing and swimming in the water. Occasionally, the sound of their voices rose above the roar of the waves, making Matt long to join in the fun. Page 4. "Come on, Sandman," shouted Jenna. "The water's warm today." Sandman was Matt's nickname. It was a fitting one, he supposed, since he spent most of his time on the shore, sunning himself or beachcombing. His friends figured that he just preferred hanging out on the beach. Good thing they don't know the truth, thought Matt. The truth was, he was afraid of the waves. "Come on," Jenna prompted him again. Matt pretended he couldn't see her right away by shielding his eyes against the sun. There was only one problem. The sun was behind him. Some of Matt's friends joined Jenna in hollering to coax him into the water. Finally, with an exaggerated sigh, Matt relented and stood up. The distance to the edge of the water seemed to stretch for miles. As he walked toward the water, the sand practically burnt the soles of his feet. Wincing, he remembered his promise to himself. This was the year he would overcome his fear of the waves. Reaching the water at last, Matt waded in up to his ankles. As he walked slowly out into the surf, he watched the others playing. Jenna was diving into the waves as they broke in the waist-deep water. Meanwhile, his best friend Oscar came body surfing in, riding the end of a wave right past Matt's feet. Matt wished he could do what his friends were doing. Page 5. Oscar jumped up with a huge grin on his face and suggested that Matt join him. Matt forced a smile. "Thanks, but no thanks," he told Oscar, pretending to shiver. "The water's way too cold for me." But Oscar was already running back into the ocean, ready to catch another wave. As usual, Matt was left alone. This time, the sigh he let out was deeper and more miserable. Page 6. Matt watched his friends tumble and dive in the waves. Why couldn't he do that? Maybe if he just took it one step at a time. Hesitantly, Matt stepped toward the deeper water. He inched forward cautiously until he was in up to his knees. He was just beginning to relax when he spotted a huge wave beginning to break. His heart pounding, Matt backed quickly toward the beach, hoping that his friends had not seen his cowardly retreat. Sitting once again on the beach blanket, Matt frowned and remembered another day much like this one. He was around 7 years old, and he had come to the beach with his family. Matt had followed his older sister, Diana, into the water that day. He remembered bobbing up and down on the waves, holding tightly to Diana's hand. They had been laughing and having a good time. Then Matt had turned around to face the shore. He remembered happily waving to his mom and dad. Page 7. As he turned back to face the waves, a giant one suddenly broke over them. Crash! The wave had smashed down on him with terrible force, and Matt had lost hold of Diana's hand. In a whirling confusion, the water knocked him over so that he couldn't tell which way was up. Over and over, he had tumbled under the water until finally he found himself washed up on shore, gasping for breath. His knees and chest were scratched by broken seashells buried in the sand. Matt had cried as he knelt in the shallow water. In his mind, the foam pulling back from the shore seemed harmless compared to the force of the wave. Within seconds, his dad had picked him up and comforted him. Page 8. After that day, Matt had never again liked going into the ocean. His parents and sister had tried to cajole him back into the water. Dad promised to hold him above the waves, and Mom showed him over and over again how to dive through them. Diana made up all sorts of fun water games to entice him into the ocean. But despite all their attempts, Matt could never get past his fear. Wading ankle deep in the water was enough for him. The funny thing was that Matt was a strong swimmer. When his parents realized how terrified he was of the ocean waves, they had signed him up for swimming lessons at the local Y. Without the waves to scare him, Matt felt comfortable in the water. He learned to float and tread water as survival skills in deep water. Then he learned how to swim and became quite adept at it. And he enjoyed swimming in the pool where he took lessons. The clear, still water seemed so different from the dark, tumbling surf on the beach. The lessons didn't erase his fear, though. Whenever Matt went to the beach, those same old waves were there, and Matt felt that same old fear. Matt believed that knowing something in his head and knowing it in his heart were two different things. Page 9. Matt stretched out on the beach blanket and watched his friends enjoying the water. He tried to find the place where he had stopped in his book, but his mind was still focused on the beach in front of him. He had a sudden thought. What if he could find the courage just to go swimming? With new determination, Matt got to his feet and headed back to the water. Jenna was waving at him, motioning for him to join them. Matt tried not to notice the waves. First, his feet were covered. Next, his ankles were underwater, and soon the water was past his knees. Matt felt the familiar fear grip his stomach, yet he continued. Now the water was up to his chest. Like someone afraid of falling into a hole, he kept his arms raised above his shoulders. Matt wanted to retreat, but he forced himself to stay where he was. Page 10. Matt tried to smile back at Jenna, hoping she wouldn't notice his discomfort. As the waves came in, he jumped up and into them. This isn't so bad, he said to himself. Off to his left, in deeper water, he saw Oscar doing the same. Oscar looked as if he could barely touch the bottom between the waves. Matt felt nervous just watching. Something else made Matt nervous as well. He saw a huge wave gathering far out on the horizon. He was thinking about the long march back to the beach when he heard Oscar's voice. He looked at where his friend was and saw panic on Oscar's face as another wave swept over him. Page 11. A moment later, Oscar's head popped up above the surface. Matt knew his friend was in trouble. Without thinking, Matt dove in Oscar's direction. A modest wave turned him over once as he swam with measured strokes towards his friend. Matt touched bottom once and pushed off again. One thought driving him forward. There was a much bigger wave on the way. Oscar was gritting his teeth in pain when Matt reached him. While Oscar struggled to tread water, he strained to keep his head above the surface. "My foot," he blurted out. "It's a cramp." As another wave passed by, Matt touched bottom and slid his arms around Oscar's chest to help keep his friend's head above water. "You need to float," Matt urged his friend. Oscar struggled to relax his lower body, but his cramped foot made it difficult. After a few kicks off the bottom with his good foot, he was able to float the lower half of his body. Page 12. Now, Matt began pulling Oscar towards shore. With his arms supporting his friend's upper body, both boys had their backs to the beach and were facing the waves. As soon as Matt's feet could reach the bottom, he struggled for footing in the shifting sand. For a few moments, the boys moved shoreward. Matt felt his legs tiring. Wading backward through the water felt like backpedaling through wet cement. Matt's calf muscles burned, and at times he almost lost his grip on Oscar. Eventually, the water became shallower and Matt's traction improved. "Don't look now, but I think we're going to get dunked," warned Oscar. Suddenly, Matt could see the enormous wave approaching them. He had been concentrating on dragging Oscar back to shore and hadn't seen past his friend's head. Now, Matt tried to prepare for the worst. He braced himself by digging his heels deep into the sand. An instant later, the wave struck. Oscar slipped from his grasp as the wave flung both boys backwards. Page 14. For a moment, Matt's feet spun over his head in the swirling water. Then his left arm and knee struck bottom. Rising to the surface, he gasped for air. Seawater spilled out of his mouth. Coughing and spitting, Matt lurched to his feet, the heavy water pulling at his legs. Oscar, too, managed to right himself a few feet away. Matt and Oscar were exhausted when they finally emerged from the water and dropped to the wet sand. When Jenna spotted the two of them, she called the rest of the group. They immediately came running and gathered around Oscar, making sure he was all right. Page 16. Bending over with his hands on his knees, Matt tried to catch his breath. Then Matt backed out of the circle, too tired to help. He could see that Oscar would be fine. Now he needed a moment to collect his thoughts. It was just dawning on him what he had done. He had faced the surf head-on and hadn't lost his nerve. He would never again be as fearful of the sea as he had once been. As he moved away from the group, Matt bumped into someone. He turned around. Jenna was standing there, looking at him with new admiration. "Way to go, Sandman," she said with a grin. "You may not go in the water much, but when you do, you know how to make a splash." The end.